My advice is that if you are actually passionate about it, you have to be actually passionate about it. Like, you can't just want to do it because it looks like fun.
Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reka and I am your host. If you are a returning listener, thank you for coming back and listening to this podcast. And if you are a new podcast listener, welcome. I'm so happy that you are here. This podcast, Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast, started almost a year ago because I wanted to share stories of full-time yoga teachers around the world of how they made their career into a career. Because full-time yoga teaching is not an easy job and it's not an easy path to choose. When I first became a yoga teacher, I really wanted to know, how is it possible to be a full-time yoga teacher? Because I wanted to be a full-time yoga teacher. I wanted to speak to other full-time teachers and ask questions, find out how many classes they teach, how are they making it work as a full-time yoga teacher. So this podcast was started because I wanted to share that with all of you, the listeners. I think it's helpful to highlight different journeys of full-time yoga teachers. And I also started interviewing not only full-time teachers, but part-time teachers, or someone who used to be a full-time who is no longer a full-time teacher, or somebody who work in the yoga industry but they're not really a yoga teacher, because I think these are all such an interesting avenue and career path that can be taken for those who love yoga and who want to work in yoga and who want to live and breathe in yoga industry. So I hope these conversations are helpful and interesting to you and also inspiring to you. So before we get started on today's podcast, I want to do a few, updates. My birthday was this past Friday, so I went to Joshua Tree with my partner for my birthday weekend, and it was really fun to be in a desert, scramble on rock in Joshua Tree and really enjoy the nature, watch the beautiful stars at night. And it was really nice to make myself not work, at least for that 24 hours, and really enjoy being fully in the moment. So that was a really fun weekend, and so much gratitude and appreciation for my partner who took me out on that weekend trip. And also for everybody else who told me happy birthday and reached out to me, messaged me. Thank you so much. I had a great weekend. Now I am 37 years old. And yeah, I'm actually excited for what 37 is going to have in store for me. So that's going to bring me to couple announcements I want to make for 2025. I have an exciting year coming up. So first thing first, I'm going to be collaborating with a local Long Beach brewery / coffee shop called Alter Society. And I'm going to be teaching yoga, and my friend Carlos is going to be playing live music and give everyone this amazing sound bath at the end. If you are interested in yoga and live music, yoga and sound bath, the event is happening at Alter Society, which is in downtown Long Beach, January 12th, Sunday from 10:30 a.m. The ticket is $25, and the ticket will get you a yoga class with sound and sound bath, as well as one free drink after class. So if you want to get a beer or coffee after class, that is going to be included in the ticket you purchase. And the space that we're going to be teaching yoga in, it's going to be upstairs of the brewery, and it used to be Masonic temple. So it's actually this beautiful space with wood floor, high ceiling, natural light. It's very, very magical place. So I think doing yoga in that space with live music is going to be epic. It's going to be amazing. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the link to the Eventbrite on the show notes so you can click that and purchase tickets. That's happening January 12th. Another announcement is that starting February, I'm going to be teaching SmartFlow 200-hour teacher training in Laguna Niguel at a yoga studio called Live Meta in Orange County. And this is 200-hour teacher training in the Smart Flow method. Very intelligent way of practicing and teaching yoga. It feels just right in your body. It is very anatomically aware way of learning and teaching and practicing yoga. And when I first learned about Smart Flow, it just blew my mind. So I am so excited to be able to teach not just any other 200-hour teacher training, but Smart Flow 200-hour teacher training. So if you're looking for good quality teacher trainings, I'm going to highly recommend the Smart Flow 200-hour teacher training that I'm going to be co-leading with Shanti next year. That's every other weekend from February to May. So it makes it a little bit more accessible if you have a day job, full-time job during the week. The training is going to be every other weekend in Laguna Niguel. So if you have questions about that, let me know. And I'll also put the show notes to that teacher trainings on the show notes. Another announcement I have is the mentorship program for yoga teachers. I open the registration for the mentorship every 4 months. Every 4 months is one module of the mentorship. So there are 3 modules total in 1 year. So we are about to start the module 1 of 2025 mentorship program. This mentorship program is for yoga teachers who is looking to deepen their knowledge, learn more about yoga, and who is interested in being the best yoga teacher that you can be. And I'm not only talking about the skill sets and knowledge it takes to be a good yoga teacher, but what it takes to be a good human being. So how can we incorporate yoga philosophy into our day-to-day lives, and also the way we teach, the way we live, the way we make decisions in our lives to be the best human being as possible, as well as the best carrier of this knowledge and tradition that we call yoga. So if you love yoga, you want to live yoga, you want to be teaching yoga in a way that is authentic, true, and respectful, and you want to do that in an amazing group of community, then this mentorship is for you. We have monthly workshop taught by guest teachers who are expert in their field, as well as there is one-on-one sessions that you get to sign up to chat about your specific questions or goals you have in teaching with me. There is monthly Q&A session, yoga philosophy discussion, as well as monthly pranayama and meditation class. There's practice teaching opportunities and anatomy focused pre-recorded content that you can receive every month. So a lot going on in the mentorship program. If you're interested in learning more, just go to the link on my bio to go to my website to read and learn more about the mentorship program for yoga teachers. I do get asked a lot from teachers about specific questions they have, or people ask me advice on yoga teaching career, and people in my mentorship group are the one that I give my 100% of attention and effort, like a dedicated effort to really help them move forward and excel in their teaching career. So I really, really love my mentorship program, and this is a place that I definitely give my all to the people in my group in terms of any advice they're looking for, help that they need, if they want my feedback. This is kind of where I give my all. So yeah, this program is my baby, it's my passion, and I just love it. So if you just want to spend more time with me, want to chat with me, you have specific questions about yoga or teaching yoga, that this is a great place to be. And not only you will get feedback from me, but you also get feedback from this amazing community of yoga teachers who are like-minded, who are all trying to be the best human being that we can be. And I think that is so beautiful. So mentorship program, if you're interested, starting January, and module 1 is starting soon. So information will be in the link in my bio. And one last quick announcement is my ethical yoga retreat in Nicaragua is happening. It's finally happening, my dream retreat, where we're not only coming and traveling to enjoy ourselves in these beautiful places in the world, but we also give back to the local communities, and we do more than just enjoy, which of course we're going to enjoy the place, we're going to practice yoga, but how can we also give back? How can we also cultivate relationship with the local people, the community, the culture? That is what this retreat is about. I am extremely grateful with overwhelming interest I received from my retreat registration being open. So I have 12 people signed up already, and there are still spots available, but I also don't want the retreat to become huge. So I'm thinking I'm gonna cap it around 15, maybe 18. So if you're interested, if you're on the fence, I would highly recommend you sign up soon, because I may close the registration at some point. I know some of you have already showed interest and haven't decided yet whether you're coming, but if you're thinking of coming, the early bird discount is going to end in January 10th. And I'm also thinking that registration might close soon, because it's not about making as much money as possible in this retreat. So I'm thinking of putting a cap on it so it doesn't get too big, because it means so much for me to be able to give a quality experience to every single person who joins this retreat. So I'm very, very happy and grateful of overwhelming support and interest in this retreat. And yeah, it's going to be my first ethical retreat I'm running, and I'm so excited, and I really want this retreat to be an amazing experience. So if you want to be part of that, if you want to spend a week with me practicing yoga in the beautiful secluded beach in northern Nicaragua, and also give back and volunteer your time in a local community, this retreat is for you. If you like surfing, this retreat is also going to be amazing for you, because the place we're going to be staying is worldly famous for amazing surf. So if that's something you want to do, or if you want to learn surfing, it's also a great opportunity to do that. So these are the announcements I have so far. Let's get started with this week's episode. This week I interviewed Michelle. And Michelle and I have never met in person, but I reached out to her probably more than a year ago when I got hired to teach a teacher training program in Peru. I reached out to her on Instagram because she taught teacher training there in the past. So I reached out to her to ask her about her experience, whether she enjoyed her experience teaching yoga, teacher training in that yoga school, and just wanted to hear from teachers who actually taught there. And she was so kind and friendly, gave me lots of amazing feedback and information, and now I get to interview her and share her work with the world to all of you. I really appreciated this conversation, and just seeing all the amazing things she have done and she continued to do in this yoga world. It's just so inspiring. So I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with her. Michelle Garcia is an experienced Indigenous yoga teacher and trainer with over 6,000 teaching hours and more than 1,500 hours of advanced training in Hatha, Vinyasa, prenatal, yin, restorative, and yoga nidra. Since 2015, she has taught yoga and led over 30 teacher training programs across Canada, the US, Mexico, Peru, and Costa Rica. As the founder of Two River Yoga, Michelle's approach blends energetic asana with yogic philosophy, creating a sacred, inclusive space for self-discovery and growth. Her mission is to empower individuals to find balance and serenity in their lives while guiding aspiring teachers to translate their unique strength into authentic, holistic yoga instruction. When not teaching, Michelle enjoys basking in the sun, trekking through jungles, and befriending cats. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation I had with Michelle, and I will speak to you on the other side. Welcome, Michelle, for coming to join me on the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm so excited to get to know you today. So please tell the listener, where are you joining this conversation from today?
I am coming to you live from Guadalajara in Mexico. Just moved here in August and it's beautiful and wonderful, and I'm really enjoying it.
Wow, I would love to hear your stories of how you ended up in Guadalajara. I went there for the first time, Guadalajara, last year, August, I believe. But I do travel to Mexico quite a bit because one of my best friends lives in Puerto Vallarta. But maybe tell us, where are you originally from?
So I'm originally from Canada. I'm from British Columbia, and I've kind of split my Canadian life within two cities. So originally, I'm born and raised in Fort St. John, which is in the far north of British Columbia. It's on the Alaska Highway, so that hopefully gives an idea of where it is, because no one ever knows. And I'm actually from a small town just outside of that called Taylor, which had 1,200 people. And then otherwise, Grand Forks, British Columbia, which is 5,000 people. So, just metropolis after metropolis for me. So yeah, from British Columbia, definitely very rural, small town vibes.
Okay. And I guess I want to know how you ended up in Mexico. So, did you grow up in Canada most of your life and moved, or were you always traveling?
Yeah, to be honest, I never had a desire to travel. It wasn't something that piqued my interest. People would be like, oh, I'm going to go to Mexico this winter with my family and all of these kinds of things. And I thought, well, that sounds nice because of the sun, but like I really just had no desire. Travel just was not something that interested me. Plus, to be honest with you, I really love Canada and I love where I'm from. British Columbia is so beautiful, mountains, nature, like it's beautiful even in winter, although I'm done with snow now. But yeah, I think I was 29 when I moved to Mexico, and I didn't really intend on moving to Mexico. I was going to go for my first time ever. I had never left like Canada or the US. That was as far as I'd ever gone. And I got invited by a friend who lived there to come and stay with her for a couple of weeks and, see if I liked it. So I packed myself up and, organized myself to spend about 6 months there. And then I just never left.
And where in Mexico was it that you first visited your friend?
I really went like hard, the first place in Mexico I went, and the only place I really went for, I don't know, however many years, was Isla Mujeres. So right off of Cancun, nice, again, tiny island. I like it small. To be honest with you, I am not a city girl. The fact that I'm in Guadalajara is not necessarily by my choosing. I would have preferred something much smaller, but.
And did you just fall in love with Mexico? Is that why you stayed?
Yes, I am definitely, born in the summer. Give me all of the sunshine. And this place in particular, Isla Mujeres, was so hot and beautiful. Like the water doesn't even look real when you look at it. Like it's this turquoise, blue, green, like it's phenomenal. And I really loved the lifestyle that I felt like you could have there. It changed a lot over the years. And then eventually I ended up leaving, but I ended up spending 5 years, 5.5 years, I think, on Isla Mujeres.
And did you learn how to speak Spanish after you moved, or did you already know how to speak Spanish?
Yeah, I don't really speak Spanish now. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm much better than I was. But yeah, where I'm from in Canada, the only languages you had as an option in school were French because, Canada, French is their second language. So that was, one of the languages that you could choose from. And in my community in particular, it was Russian. So I never had any exposure to Spanish whatsoever. There were zero Spanish speaking people anywhere near me. Again, very rural community. And so when I moved to Mexico, I knew sí, por favor, gracias. That was all I had for Spanish. And I think that's actually probably one of the reasons why I liked living on Isla Mujeres so much was in the beginning, when you're so nervous and you can't communicate, it was really nice to be in a very touristic area where everybody spoke English for the most part. However, I do feel like that was a bit of a detriment because I could have learned more Spanish you know. But anyways, I ended up marrying a man from Argentina, and he has been very helpful with this learning of the Spanish. So my Spanish is much better. I can communicate, but it's not pretty.
Okay, I love your traveling story. I'm sure more will come up, but when did you first get introduced to yoga? Was that in Canada or was that after you started traveling or
It
moved?
was in Canada. I was okay. Born in Fort St. John, moved to Grand Forks, went to high school in Grand Forks. And then as soon as I graduated high school, I moved back to Fort St. John, back to the north, because it's a very oil and gas industry up there. And so it's a really great place to get a good start. I didn't want to go to university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have gone for psychology, but that's a whole nother thought. Um, and so I had gone up there, lived there for a couple of years, again, like got a good start. And then I had a plan to become a veterinary technician. And I enrolled in a program that was back down south, closer to where my parents were living now. And literally on my drive to move back down south, I got an email saying that my course was canceled, which was supposed to start in like 2 months, I think, because unfortunately, the person who was supposed to lead the program was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so I found myself all of a sudden back living with my parents, which was not the plan, and back in my small town that I, felt like I had worked really hard to get out of. And then I didn't really know what to do. I ended up working at a coffee shop, and one evening, one of the clients that would always come, she was actually also my sister's mental health practitioner, which I love her so much. Her name is Amy. She's the one that introduced me to yoga. We turned the coffee shop into like a pop-up yoga studio, and it would happen once a week. And it was just everything and then some. Like I get like all the feels, like I could cry. It was just so, it was so good. It was so important for me that time.
I love that coffee shop that had became a pop-up yoga studio.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you started practicing yoga, and that was in that small town that you grew up in.
Yeah.
And was it quite a popular thing for people to come to this pop-up yoga class?
I mean, I would say no in terms of like what we might consider to be like a popular yoga class. I think there were like 5 to 7 of us, depending, sometimes less. It actually started because the owner of the coffee shop, Roger, he had a men's group, and they were practicing yoga with Amy, this wonderful woman, at a different location. And then once he took over the coffee shop, he was like, well, why don't we just use our coffee shop? We clean the floors and put the chairs away every night. So we've got this huge, empty, great space. Let's continue this like men's yoga. So I was basically in the men's group yoga, which I think is probably the opposite of what most people end up in for their yoga classes. I feel like it's very female dominant. And yeah, it was just me, and like, I mean, these guys in the class with me were in their 50s and above. And it was, yeah, it was great. It was everything and then some.
I love that. And do you remember, it doesn't have to be like one time in your life, but around the time that you realized that you wanted to become a yoga teacher?
It's Amy's fault. Amy was the only yoga teacher in our community, and she wasn't always around. Because she was a mental health, I guess, counselor or therapist, and we were in such a rural area. We have a lot of rural towns around us. And so she would be servicing all of these rural towns. So sometimes she would be gone for a week at a time or 2 weeks at a time, or whatever. So her classes, they really were pop-ups. It was just whenever she was back, whenever she had the energy to give, she would, host these classes. And honestly, they were amazing. They were a $5 drop in. She brought the mats and the props. And it was magical. And I think this was probably after about a year or so of taking her pop-up classes, because her and I were quite close, because she was my sister's counselor. My sister has a lot of addictions issues and other issues. And so her and I, we became very, very close on like a really deep level. And I just remember this one time she had the pop-up in a church. And we were sitting outside after class, and I think I was expressing how I was feeling very stuck in the job that I was in, and like things just, my life just in general didn't feel right. And she like immediately was just like, you know that you would be an amazing yoga teacher, right? And I was like, girl, stop. That's like, you don't know. Like, I don't know that I could do that. Like, it sounds like a lovely idea, but she's like, no, really, like, I really think that you should like consider becoming a yoga teacher. She's like, even like not considering to, teach full time as a yoga teacher, but just like, the community needs a yoga teacher. She thought that I would just be a really great option. And so, yeah, it's her. She's the one that planted the seed.
I love to hear that story. And how did you find your 200-hour teacher training? Where was it? And, what was your experience like?
So the job that I was doing at the time, I actually worked in retail banking for the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, for CIBC. And I was young when I started working there. I worked there for 6 years. I think I started at 23 and ended when I was about 29. And I was getting so frustrated in this job because it was such what's the right way to say that? The job was so performance driven. It was meeting these sales targets, and I felt like I was being pushed to sell things to people that they didn't need, and I refused to do that. The thing that I loved about my job was that I was able to help people and set them up with the products and the things that would really benefit them. And I ended up working my way to being like top 20% in the country for sales authentically, which I felt really good about. And then I asked for a $500 annual raise in my salary, and they said no. And I was like, excuse me, like this is maximum $20 a paycheck, like not even, what do you mean? And so I ended up surfing the web, and I was like, well, Amy told me I could be a yoga teacher. So I literally Googled yoga teacher trainings. I wanted something that was close by because, for one, I was not somebody who was, big into travel. I had never gone anywhere. So I ended up I found one that was in between Squamish and Whistler. It was a company called Yoga Kara. They are an online program now called Your Yoga Flow. And yeah, I found it. It was the perfect amount of time that I would have off in my banking career. You got 3 weeks a year of vacation. So I booked it. I think it was a 16-day program. And yeah, one day I was just like, you know what, screw it. And I booked it. And I was like, enough is enough. I'm tired of being a number.
And you said it was 16-day program. It was a 16 days straight, or did you have a day off? Was it like a week on, week off? What was the
It was 16 days straight. One of the things that I really liked about the program is also they didn't even consider it a 200-hour. They actually considered it a 250-hour because it was 16 days. And I think our days started at 6 a.m. and they didn't end until 8:30 or 9 at night. Like they were long days. And yeah, no days off, just like full blown all day, every day. Yes, there were little breaks in the day, but they were very short. Yeah, it was a very much like marketed intensive training.
And were you commuting from your home to this training, or was it far enough away that you had to find another place, accommodation?
It was about an 8 or 9 hour drive away from where I'm from. British Columbia is massive. And so it was very far away. But because it was an intensive program, it was done at a place that I don't even know if it still exists. It was the Sea to Sky Retreat Center. It was a Buddhist retreat center. It's on Daisy Lake in between Whistler and Squamish. And it was gorgeous. It was like an like lodge, I guess I would say. And yeah, so it was amazing. It was beautiful. The best food. Oh my goodness.
Sounds so cool. Okay, so tell me, what kind of yoga training was it? Was it vinyasa, or what was the kind of style that was covered in it?
It was a Hatha Vinyasa program. And yeah, I think, to be honest with you, before I had taken the program, I think I had somewhere around 20 yoga classes under my belt. Like I had maybe been practicing for like a year, but like I mentioned, Amy would only be in town every so often. So like I didn't have a consistent practice. So yeah, I think maybe I had maybe 30 yoga classes before taking my first teacher training.
And how was your experience? Did you love it? Did you enjoy it? Did you meet great people? What was your experience like?
It was amazing, honestly. I mean, the program was challenging and intensive in that way, but I had some of the biggest aha moments of my life. I'm getting goosebumps as I say it. Like it was so transformational. I took the teacher training because I was encouraged to take it. And, the seed had been planted that I might make a good yoga teacher. And I liked that idea, but I was still working in banking and I didn't think that it was going to be possible to be a yoga teacher. But honestly, it was the first couple of days we started talking about the yamas and the niyamas, and it just clicked. It was like the biggest aha moment. I felt like I had found something that I was like, why doesn't everybody know about this? Like, well, shouldn't everybody like have this understanding and all this information? And so I was just right away, I was like, oh my God, I want to teach. And I didn't really know that I wanted to. I liked the idea, but yeah, it was phenomenal. I made some of the greatest friends, people that I'm still in contact with, actually. And yeah, it was a really life-changing experience.
Wow. And when you did that 16 days training nonstop, it was every day, all day for 16 days. Did you quit your job or were you able to get time off from your work to go do this teacher training?
I took it during my 3 weeks vacation. I booked my 3 weeks vacation and then just took it because it took me a day to drive there, a day to drive home. And like, let's be honest, anybody that comes out of an intensive yoga teacher training, like you're eating, sleeping, breathing yoga all day, every day. The place that I was in, I mean, this was 2015. The Wi-Fi was not strong. You could not, there was one tiny area of the whole property that you could get Wi-Fi, but you never had enough time to sit and like communicate. So you were in this amazing yoga bubble. And I remember leaving the program and having a hard time getting up to speed on the highway in my car because I was like, I can't drive this fast. Like, this is wild. I was just like chanting mantras, trying to keep it together while everybody's just flying past me. It was a bizarre experience.
Tell me what happened after. Like, so you finish your teacher training, you're going back to your full-time job that you weren't super excited about. And did you start teaching like once or, a couple times a week right away? Or did you kind of go start teaching right away? Or did you take some time before you started teaching? So tell me the transition from your life before to your life after 200.
I went back to my, typical banking job, and I did start teaching. I think it was in within the first month of graduating because I wanted to make sure that I had my insurance, and I also like set myself up with a sole proprietor and like got all the like business sides of yoga like situated. And yeah, started teaching. Started teaching just one day a week, but because I was in such a small town, we didn't have yoga studios. So I had to find areas to rent out. So I was lucky in that I knew a woman who owned a dance studio. That was something that we did have, and she wanted to offer yoga there. And so I was super excited. I was like, yes, please put me in, coach. Let me teach the class. So I started teaching one class a week, and definitely in the beginning didn't have very many students. Again, a very small town, like the amount of people that had exposure to yoga, it wasn't really a ton, but yeah, started teaching one day a week, and then everything just kind of continued to snowball, I guess.
And when you started teaching at the dance studio, was she paying you to teach this once a week class, or were you renting a space, paying her for the rental, and then earning the money that students were paying you?
So when I was teaching at the dance studio, it was a 50-50 split. So I think the classes were $10 a person. And again, this is $10 Canadian, so keep that in mind. And we would split it 50-50, but we were both in charge of like marketing, and they really did their best to make sure that the space was like ready for me when I showed up, and it was clean and things like that. So it felt like a really appropriate way for me to, get my foot in there. And really, it was more about teaching than it was about the money, because I did have a full-time job as a financial services rep. So I was, making my salary money there, and then just a little bit of extra teaching yoga.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so interesting, and it's good for listeners to hear different teaching experiences, because I'm sure, even though I live in Los Angeles where there's yoga studios every corner almost, but I'm sure some of the listeners are living in a place where there aren't a lot of yoga studios. So that I think what you're sharing kind of shows that you can always find a way or create an opportunity yourself to find a place to teach. And sometimes when you teach at a more non-conventional space that's not a yoga studio, it can really bring in some students who may not feel comfortable walking into a typical yoga studio. So I love that you went out there and looked for places and opportunities to teach.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't even remember why, but there were some gaps in between when I would teach at the dance studio, and then I ended up renting that same church that my friend had taught from, which is, I think that also is just like a really cool thing, that a church knew that I was going to be teaching yoga and was totally okay with that. Like I love that. That made me very, very excited. But it was such a beautiful place, like stained glass windows. It was lovely. It was a great big space. It was quiet. The acoustics were magical. It was, it was a cool spot. But that one was nice because I rented it. So I think I paid, those were the days, like $20 an hour to rent this space. And then I could charge people the same $10 that I was. And, if I got 5 people, all of a sudden I was like, hey, we're not doing too bad. Like, look at that. We made like an appropriate amount of money. And it was really great. I actually loved it when I was teaching in the church. It was also only like 3 blocks away from my house at the time. So I could just literally walk over with my mats and get set up. It was great.
So for, teaching at church space as well as dance studio, how and what kind of promotion, I guess, you were using to let people know that you're teaching a class there?
It's crazy to think about how different our marketing has come, right? So my marketing, again, because it was a small town, was really just word of mouth. And I did have a Facebook page at that point, and I don't know why at some point I deleted it, and I really wish I wouldn't have done that, because I really wish I could have brought that back. Maybe I will, but I don't know. Anyways, it was mainly like Facebook posts and word of mouth, because I had people coming into my office every day. That was, part of my job. And part of my job was to talk to them about their lives and figure out what was appropriate for them. And there was always an opportunity to sneak in, like, have you tried yoga? Would you like to come to yoga? And actually, I did end up getting people coming to yoga classes from that. So, I mean, yeah.
Yes, I love. I mean, even now, I feel like word of mouth is probably the strongest marketing tools out there. So I love that. And I know you said that at age 29 is when you left your corporate job, and also I think you said, is it 29 is when you also went to Mexico for the first time?
Yeah.
So I guess you were doing both teaching yoga part-time, couple classes a week, and having this full-time job, and there was a big change that happened, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So I think at some point I had been teaching, a couple of classes a week. I think I taught 2. I think I did like Fridays and Sundays. And I had decided, like, this is just not the life I'm meant for. When I came back from my first teacher training, I ended up leaving a relationship that I was in for like 3.5 years. I just decided, again, like everything, I just blew up my life. I was like, great, let's start fresh. And after I had broken up with my partner, within a year, I actually took a promotion and moved to the city. I moved to Victoria. And again, people are like, Victoria is not a very big city, but it was for me. And I took a promotion, and I literally just started selling everything. Like all of my furniture, all of the things and stuff that I had accumulated, and used that to pay off my any and all debt that I had, and also give myself a little bit of a buffer, because at that point I had decided, like, I'm out. Like, I'm taking this promotion literally strategically in order to save up enough money that I can quit and go teach yoga. And I really didn't know where that was going to be or what that was going to look like. But I ended up moving from my tiny town over to Victoria, working my full-time job in banking. And it was a promotion. So I actually ended up having more, I guess, what's the word? I ended up having more responsibility in that role than I did in the other one. So it was a bit more demanding. But I actually also, so I moved there, got this promotion, and then took on a part-time job at a athletic apparel company in the mall that the bank was in. So I would work, that's all I did was work for about 4 months, I think. And once I had enough money saved up, I was like, okay, that's nice, bye. And I quit.
And were you teaching yoga in Victoria at the time, or you were just too busy with your full-time job and working at the apparel job?
Yeah, I wish I would have taught in Victoria, but no, I didn't. I was going to a studio. Any chance that I had an opportunity to, I was going, and I was trying really hard to be there, like a few days a week at least. And I loved that yoga studio. Shout out One Yoga in Victoria. They were amazing. But yeah, I had no time. It was a full-time job and a part-time job and trying to go to yoga. And I was single as well, so I was trying to meet people and I was in a new city, and so it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah, and but it seems like your goal was to save enough so you can quit and go teach yoga. Like that was your goal, was you wanted to teach yoga.
Yes, and I didn't, again, at this point, I did not think that I would end up in a different country, but I think I moved to Victoria in September, and in November, the company that I had worked or not worked for, taken my yoga teacher training through Yoga Kara, they ended up putting on a, what do you call it? Not a raffle. Ah, they ended up putting on a contest. And the contest was to win a free prenatal yoga teacher training. And it was going to be in Hawaii. And I was like, well, I could do Hawaii. Like, that's in the US. They'll speak English. Like, I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's great. Amazing. I had never been and it looked amazing. So, yeah, let's do it. So, I submitted all the things. I think it was like you had to write these blog posts or something like that. I did it and I got it. And I feel like that's the first time I've ever like been given or like won something like that before, but it was amazing. And the reason why I wanted to take my prenatal training was because I don't know about you, but in my first 200 hour, and what I've really noticed is like in a lot of 200 hours, you don't really get a lot of instruction on how to keep someone who's pregnant safe. And you get a little bit, but you don't necessarily remember it. So I was like, man, I would really benefit from this because again, being in that small town that I was in, I'd be teaching these public classes and all of a sudden all of the pregnant people would show up at my classes and I was like, well, there's only so many of you in this whole town and you're all here at the same time. And so I needed to figure out how to properly teach prenatal yoga. It wasn't that I thought that, I wanted to be a prenatal yoga teacher, but I was like, I need that information, that safety information. But yeah, so when I won that, I was like, well, we're going to Hawaii and it was going to be in, I think it was March. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to quit my job in February. So I just worked really, really hard for those few months. It saved up so that I could afford my flights and whatever. And yeah, I ended up deciding that since I was going to be there anyways, they were also offering a yin training at the same location, same school, just there was like a few weeks in between. So I went and took my prenatal training and then went on a little road trip around the big island of Hawaii with one of the girls that was in the program with me. And then ended up finishing it with like another week-long yin program and then went back to Victoria without having to work at the bank, just continued working at that athletic apparel store for a little while. And then I think that's when, well, that is when the travel bug bit me.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I love that you won what is it, the prenatal training in Hawaii. That's so amazing. And I'm so glad it lined up with doing a yin training and you got to travel and do a road trip around Big Island in between that. Sounds like an amazing experience you had there. Um, I'm curious to know how did your family, friends, or your coworkers react to you trying to make this big transition in life, like quitting this maybe secure corporate job and wanting to go teach yoga? And in some people, that might seem like a maybe crazy choice you're making.
You're totally right. That's exactly actually how most people viewed it. I'm really grateful because my parents, they have always been really supportive of it, even though they were like, oh, come on, Michelle, you just had this great job. And like, they're from the age group of people where you get one job and you keep that job for the rest of your life and you get the pension and whatever. Whereas me, I'm like, okay, I had that job. Thank you very much for the tiny pension payout. I'm going to go do something else. But yeah, so it was interesting to see different people's viewpoints on it because some people thought that it was amazing and they're like, wow, that's so brave. And other people are like, what do you mean? Like, where are you going to go? You've never even traveled anywhere before. And now you're just going to leave the country and go teach yoga? Like, what are you thinking? And I was like, I don't know, adventure.
I love that you just still did it, it didn't matter. So is that when you decided to leave everything and move to Mexico because you had a friend who lived in Isla Mujeres?
Yeah, it was actually when I was in Hawaii. I was working at an off-grid eco center. It was amazing. If anybody ever gets a chance to go, KMEC is what it was called, Kirpal Meditation and Eco Center, I think. But it was amazing. And I was doing a yoga trade there. Luckily, at that point, I had figured out yoga trade. So I went back to Hawaii and did a yoga trade a few months after I had come back from taking those trainings. I was like, I can't, we're not done with the Big Island. I have to go back. So I did. And when I was there, it was towards the end of me needing to leave and go back to Canada. And this friend of mine from back home had called me and she was like, hey, what are your plans after Hawaii? And it was February at this point. And I was like, oh, I'm not going back to Canada because snow. Like, you've just given me tropical paradise. I can't do that. And she said, I have this job opportunity here. We're looking for somebody in marketing and sales. And that's kind of like, at least the sales part of it is kind of what I had done when I was in banking. So she thought it would be a good fit. I had an interview with the guy and honestly, I didn't like his vibe. It just didn't sit well with me. And I was like, I don't think so. She was like, well, why don't you still come anyways? Like, you can stay with me and whatever. And so I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I will. And so, yeah, I ended up going back to Canada and I was in Canada for maybe just a couple of weeks and then booked a flight and just a one-way down to Isla Mujeres. And she picked me up from the ferry and yeah, the rest is history.
God, I love hearing all of your stories. I had a follow-up question. Oh, so you said you had a yoga trade membership. You found a yoga trade job in Big Island of Hawaii. So were you teaching yoga at this eco center?
Yeah, it was actually really amazing. Their prices are definitely different now, the way that I've seen people working for this particular place. But yeah, it was amazing. I think I paid $150 a month. And that just went towards food and accommodations. And then in exchange, we were supposed to be doing approximately like 30 hours a week of work. And when you were the yoga teacher, your job was to teach one yoga class every morning. And there was usually another yoga teacher with you as well. So they would take some days and you would take the others. And then on the other side of it, everybody was like rotating in through kitchen and housekeeping and like landscaping and stuff like that. I opted to stay with just the yoga, housekeeping, and like food prep because I love to eat. So I was very excited to be around the food in the kitchen. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. I had worked as a housekeeper before, like back in high school. And I'm a bit like nerdy that way in that I love to clean, which is weird maybe, but yeah, it was really fun. And then I also ended up being able to teach like private classes or put on like additional group classes and then gain a little bit of money from that, which was nice. And then I would also be like the chauffeur. Like I would like shuttle people to and from the airport. Got to drive this really great green van. I will never forget that.
Oh, that sounds like a fun time. How long were you there doing the work trade?
Think I was there for 4 months.
Mhm.
I think it was 4 months because I'm pretty sure I left and went in October. Yeah, 4 months. It was 4 months.
Sounds amazing. So, did you feel like you were ready to move on to the next place? Is that why you left, or was there other reason why you decided to leave Hawaii?
I didn't want to leave Hawaii. Oh man, again, it's one of those places that is just so transformational. And everybody that goes there, I feel like gets that out of it, especially if you spend a long amount of time on the island. Like I know 4 months doesn't seem like a long time, but for me, it definitely did. And yeah, I did not want to leave. I bawled my eyes out on the plane leaving. I just did not feel like it was time to go. I had so many things that I wanted to do and wished I could stay, but I was Canadian. I could only be in the States for 6 months, and it's 6 months out of an entire year. So I had already been there for over a month in, taking my yin and prenatal like earlier in the year. So I just basically ran out of time being able to be in the States. And so I had to go.
So you went back to Canada for a couple of weeks and then decided to go to Isla Mujeres in Mexico. At this point, I'm curious. I'm always curious with people who travel so much or who kind of like decide to live this alternative lifestyle, which I also have lived this lifestyle for quite some time. Did you sell all of your stuff? So everything you own was in your backpack or suitcase? Or did you have storage? Did you have places in your parents' home that you could leave boxes behind? What did you do with all of your stuff?
Yeah, I sold most of everything. Like I sold all the like vehicles, almost all of my furniture. There's just a couple of things that are like family heirlooms, like from grandparents. So I think my dad has oh, actually, no, my mom has that. My mom has my rocking chair and she has my dresser. And she has at this point only like 2 boxes of stuff. Most of it is like full of toques. So for the Americans, the beanies, it's got like it's some warmer headgear. My Canada Goose parka is still there because you can't get rid of that. That thing is $800. She's not going anywhere. It's a nice jacket. Got to keep it. And like my figure skates. So there's little things that are there. But just almost out of necessity in the sense that like when I go home to visit my family, I have warm clothes to wear if I'm going in the winter. But that's it. Like everything else, I sold it all, just liquidated as much as I could. And yeah, tried to travel light. I mean, I still had a full-size suitcase and a carry-on. So.
Okay, now I'm excited to hear about your story in Isla Mujeres. Did you start teaching yoga there? What happened there?
When I first got there, again, I was really lucky. Like this friend of mine who was from Canada, from that same small town, she had been there for quite a few years. So she had great connections and she just is that kind of person. She's the connector. She knows how to put people together and like make those kinds of things happen. So I'm super grateful for her because she was really, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have ended up there. It just wouldn't have happened. So when I first got there, I was teaching some private classes because she was also working for that, place that I had the interview with. They're actually a boutique. I don't know if you would call it a retreat center, but they're like a boutique hotel with a lot of rooms. And it's very beautiful. Oh my gosh. And they do a ton of yoga teacher trainings there. It's a really beautiful spot to be. So I started teaching some private classes for them whenever they would have guests. And at this point, I actually felt like I was quite burnt out from teaching. I was teaching a lot when I was in Hawaii and it was great. I needed time, I think, to integrate things. So I ended up just teaching private classes, which was very like few and far between. And I got offered a job as a bartender. And I had never worked in a restaurant before. Like I went from banking to yoga to bartending. It was an interesting circle. But oh my God, it was amazing. It was so much fun. And the people that I was working with, he was actually Canadian and he was so great. They were so supportive and wonderful. And I ended up working as a bartender for 9 months at like a beach bar. And it was so much fun. And I met so many amazing people. And it just, I did that for about 9 months. And it was really challenging to be a yoga teacher and a bartender at the same time, because I mean, at that point, I was just very excited to be there. So like if somebody was going to buy me a drink, I was going to take it. And also because I didn't have a lot of money. So I was like, yes, please. And we were also like encouraged to, if somebody was going to buy you a drink, that was money for the bar, and it was money for us because it increases everything, increases the amount of tips you would get. So it became really challenging to work until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then try to do yoga the next day, or like even consider teaching. It was challenging. So at one point I was like, this just is not a healthy choice for me anymore. So I hung up my bar tool and went back to teaching, and spoke to a couple places on the island where I would be able to, just like I did at that church, set up my own little yoga space, and ordered some yoga mats, and then just started teaching yoga, and let go of the bartending, which was honestly quite scary because bartending made me some great money. And I was like, yoga might not. So that was interesting.
Wow. I was also a bartender in South Africa when I lived there. It was really fun. I have great memories from that time. So I completely understand. So it's so interesting that you went on the route of, again, organizing your own yoga classes with not teaching for a studio or the existing retreat centers. Because I would imagine there's probably quite a lot of that in Isla Mujeres, maybe.
It's funny because like, yes and no. I think when I was there, there was one, no, there might have been like 2, there was one proper yoga studio. And like, when I say proper yoga studio, I mean like there's a reception desk, there's 4 walls, they have all of the props that you could need, and like an indoor space and an outdoor space. And it was very much just all about yoga. But I don't remember if it was that I just didn't have the money to be going and taking classes, or what the deterrent was for me going there. I think I was really nervous about even the concept of like considering teaching yoga in Spanish, because my Spanish was garbage. Just terrible. I hadn't learned really much of any of it because I was working at a very Americanized bar. So I didn't really get a ton of exposure to it. So there was another place as well on the beach that offered yoga, but they were already full of yoga teachers. Nobody needed any extra yoga teachers. But I don't even remember how that happened. I think it was because I had met someone. Oh yeah, I met this guy named David, and he was the manager at a hotel that was like right down near the beach, and they had a yoga space, but they were a brand new hotel. They hadn't opened it up to the public yet, and he ended up reaching out and saying like, "Hey, would you be interested in teaching yoga classes?" And I was like, yeah. And it was a beautiful spot. It was right underneath this enormous like banyan style tree, where all the roots are crazy, and there was a great big Buddha head, and it was like a nice little palapa style roof with like the grass over. It was beautiful. That was where I first started like offering yoga classes on the island.
And you were teaching in English, and were you able to, I'm sure there's enough tourism there that enough English speakers would want to take English yoga classes.
Yeah, in the 5.5 years that I lived there, only maybe twice did I have someone in my classes who didn't speak English. And it's funny, like when I think about it now, I'm almost frustrated by that, but it's also partly my fault for not learning how to teach in Spanish. I still don't know how to teach in Spanish. I need to, properly figure that out. But it's funny, I would talk to other yoga teachers on the island I had one best friend, she was amazing, Jasmine, and she had taken her yoga teacher training, and she was Mexican. And so I said, like, help me, how do I teach in Spanish? And she was like, I don't even know how to teach in Spanish. I took my teacher training in English. I have no idea. And so it was a bit frustrating. And when I look back on it now, I really wish that I would have pushed more to learn how to teach in Spanish, because I felt like those were the people that really probably would have benefited so much from having a Spanish speaking teacher. And it's unfortunate that I couldn't be that.
Well, I wonder if there was other Spanish speaking yoga teachers on the island.
There were maybe a couple, actually, like indefinitely now for sure. I know a few of them. Like there's a few who are like absolutely English and Spanish speaking. From my recollection, there wasn't anybody who was strictly Spanish at the time, But now there definitely is. There's actually a lot more Spanish speaking teachers now. But for some reason, when I was there, I mean, yeah, there's only like two that I could think of that were like Mexican for one. Most of us were expats and foreigners teaching. But that was also the majority of the demographic in these classes was, there was on the beach and it was like yoga and then margaritas. Like one of the places was literally, it was a beach bar, the Treehouse. And I taught there for a couple of years. And that's one of the places where I say like it was a studio, but it wasn't really a studio. We had the mats, but there was no walls. It was on a big deck, like overlooking the water, beautiful location. But the reception was the bar. And unfortunately, the understanding of like yoga needs to be maybe like a little bit more quiet was hard to comprehend for people who are running a bar. So it was an interesting place to teach, that's for sure. The views were great.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how was that transition of being a bartender for 9 months? Like you said, you can earn quite a bit of money being a bartender with tips and all of that. And you said there was a little bit of fear of quitting that, the kind of, I guess, security of income from bartending, switching to teaching yoga again. So how was that transition like? Were you able to make it as a teacher? How many classes did you have to teach to be able to earn enough money, or did you have other streams of income?
Yeah, at one point I was teaching 11 classes a week on the island. I was bouncing in between two different studios and I was offering classes like almost every day. I think the only day that I had off was Sundays. It was really challenging in that area to have a class that would be in the evenings because most of the time margaritas start before then. So it was really hard to get people into classes for evenings. So I would just take advantage of as many mornings as I could, teaching multiple classes like 7:30 and then 9, and then sometimes 10, depending on how I had to maneuver that around. But yeah, at the end of that, I was doing 11 classes a week and it was fine. Like it wasn't, don't get me wrong, I wasn't like able to save money, I would say at that point. The place that I was living, people think, Mexico is so cheap. It's like, actually, and when you're living in a very touristic area, it's not. Like, yes, if you know where to go and like get, good prices on things, then that's great. But, and luckily for me, my rent was really low at the time, but like through COVID and things like that, the prices skyrocketed. And yeah, it was definitely challenging to make a living as a yoga teacher. I ended up meeting my now husband at that time, and if it wasn't for having two incomes to share the rent on one place, I don't think I could have done it personally.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that sharing your honest experience of what really happened is so important, and that's what I try to do in the podcast. Is like, I think a lot of teachers I interviewed, like there's some time that we really struggled financially to be able to make it work, or some of us have roommates, some of us have partners we live with so we can share rent, and especially living in expensive places. So for some, and I think many teachers, that's a reality, like a lot of us, like most yoga teachers are not millionaires, and we are able to do so because either we have another streams of income or we share cost of living with partner roommates. And thank you for sharing that part. And I'm curious. Well, I have questions about pandemic, because I think that's where you were during the pandemic. Okay.
Yes, I was.
So maybe before the pandemic, one more question is visa. Like, how were you able to stay in Mexico for that long? Did you have to do visa runs where you leave and come back? I know you eventually applied for permanent residency. So can you tell us a little bit for, others who's also interested in living in Mexico or another country?
Yeah, to be able to enter the country, you have to come in as a tourist and you can stay for 6 months. And then every 6 months you had to leave. And it's funny because just like I mentioned, going to Hawaii and being able to be in the US for 6 months and then having to leave for 6 months. Like the US is very specific that you're only allowed to be there for 180 days of the year. Whereas Mexico, yes, that's on paper what it was saying, but I think because of the draw of tourism and how much money it brings into the economy, it was very easy to come into the country. You just leave for a few days and then come back in. So you'd have to go somewhere. Who knew where he went? Most of the time I would go back home to Canada because I was like, great, let me go visit my family and then I'll come back. And I was never gone for very long, only ever a couple weeks, and then I would go right back. But so I did it that way for the first little while until I ended up getting my temporary residency. And the only reason why I was able to get temporary residency was because of the pandemic. So Mexico, again, cheers to you, Mexico. I love this country. They ended up rolling out a program during the pandemic where if you were there for 6 months and your visa expired, if you weren't able to travel back home to your country, you didn't have to leave the country. They would just restamp your passport as though you had left and come back. So that was great. Gave myself another 6 months of being able to be in the country. That was fabulous. And then right when my 6 months was coming up, they introduced the temporary residency, but waiving the income requirements because the pandemic was crazy. And coming into it, all of my money was gone. There was no way for me to be able to apply for a temporary residency visa because I didn't have any income to prove because I'd been making cash on the beach for the past 3 years or whatever it was. So when they ended up giving that option to, extend and have temporary residency without income requirements, I was like, score. And so then got my temporary residency that way.
I love it. And I guess if you don't mind saying this on the podcast, but
Mhm.
when we're working at the bar, teaching yoga, those time it was all cash transactions. So you didn't
Yep.
really, it was kind of under the table. You didn't have to claim it, or I don't know.
I did not claim it.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I love when people try to finesse it and be like, oh, it's a gray area. It's like, no, actually, I was not legally able to work.
Yeah, definitely. Because I remember doing some research of oh, maybe I could also teach yoga in Mexico, and legally I wasn't able to
Yeah.
without a proper visa or permit. So I do know there's many people who still do it,
Yeah, and it's funny because I think we think that this is just something that people do when they go to these tropical countries, but it happens all the time. I have friends who are in Spain and who are doing the exact same thing. I know people who have come to Canada and have done the exact same thing, and people have gone to the US and done the exact same thing. I mean, this is, it's more common than I think we really realize, but I mean, I got to be honest with you, it's not fun. It's very anxiety inducing, terrifying. Yeah, it was not a good time. I'm not gonna lie.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. Oh my God, I interviewed one yoga teacher. You might know her, Arberly. She also taught at Moksha.
I
And she,
never got to meet her, but I've seen her in photos and stuff.
yeah, I also never met her in person, but through, connections, we did an interview and she was amazing. And, shout out to Arberly, she's in Bali right now, that she was teaching teacher training in Thailand. But Thailand also has a rule of you're not allowed to teach or earn money without proper visa. And I guess they're really strict. So she actually got arrested.
Oh,
Police came to
that
teach
was my nightmare.
and arrested her, and she had to stay. I don't know if she stayed a night, but she had to go to a jail or prison.
Yeah, immigration prison.
Yeah, and yeah, anyway, so that was also eye-opening experience that she shared. Okay, so I would love to hear about the pandemic. So you shared a little bit about how you were affected by it. I'm sure the tourism was way slower for a while, even although Mexico was one of the countries that I was able to travel quite easily during the pandemic. And, the border stayed open, I don't know for the whole world, but to Americans, I was able to travel in and out. There was some testing we had to do before coming back to the United States, but their border stayed open, which was really, for me, lovely and nice that I still was able to travel during that time. So I'm curious, how did it affect you since you were living there?
Yeah, I mean, again, shout out Mexico. Great country because they really did. They had to stay open because most of the areas in Mexico, at least where I was especially, it's tourism driven. That is what people literally that's how they sustain their lives there. So if you don't have tourism, you don't have money. And let me tell you, friend, that was not fun. So being on the island, because at this point I didn't have my temporary residency. I was just there as a tourist, as was my boyfriend at the time, now husband. And he's from Argentina. I'm from Canada. So we're both not like Mexican citizens or residents or anything like that. We were both, doing the same thing every 6 months. You got to go somewhere. And he's a musician. And so when my work died as a yoga teacher, his work died as a musician. We all of a sudden just did not have any income. Luckily, we had been working really hard together to save money because we were actually going to go to Costa Rica and Guatemala. We had our flights booked and all of this. We had yoga trades lined up that were going to take both him and I, him as my, like as a musician, and then me as a yoga teacher, which was amazing and really exciting. We were so stoked to go. And then everything just started shutting down and we were like, shit. So luckily, we still had a bit of money saved up. So we were able to pay our rent and like keep ourselves like afloat, but honestly, not for very long. Like there was a moment, a few months into the pandemic, maybe only 3, because I think I only had a couple months worth of money for rent and food. And we literally got down to our last $5. And in Mexico, they were offering something called a despensa, which was a box of like rice, flour, beans, sugar, and like there were like maybe a couple of little extra things in there. And we ended up having to get one because there was no way for us to make any money and be able to feed ourselves. The hard part too about being on the island was if you didn't have an identification piece that said that you lived on the island, which you couldn't get unless you were a resident, and we were technically tourists, so you couldn't leave the island and come back on. The island was completely shut down for a couple of months. We also had what was called a ley seca, so it was the dry law. There was no alcohol allowed to be purchased. So again, restaurants weren't open, bars weren't open, which was like the bread and the butter of the money in the economy there. So it was beautiful in the sense that it was so quiet. There was nobody in the streets. Like one taxi would drive by your house like maybe twice a day, which was just unheard of. Like the sound of golf carts didn't exist anymore. Like it was beautiful. But it was also incredibly strict. And there were, military guys outside with very large guns, like approaching you if you were outside. You weren't allowed to be outside, right? So it was very scary, like being approached with a very large gun in a language that's not your own and having to try to explain to them, like, I'm just going to the grocery store. And like, you weren't allowed to go with your partner either. Like everything was just it was so scary. You weren't allowed to go to the beach. The beaches were closed. So many people are like, oh, how amazing. You got to be in paradise with nobody around. It's like, actually, no, I was stuck in my tiny apartment and couldn't afford air conditioning, so it was a really brutal experience. But one thing that did really come out of that I'm so grateful for is that I ended up teaching online. And I mean, that was a whole nother learning curve. Oh my God, like from teaching public classes to like, all of a sudden, I'm not a very tech savvy gal. And having to teach, like I started teaching, I think on Facebook Live first, which was like hilarious. And then like trying to figure out lighting and microphones, but like also not actually being able to feed yourself. So how do you buy the microphones? How do you get the lighting? And like, I remember asking someone for like tips and they're like, oh, well, you need to get better lighting and you need to get a microphone. I was like, I have $5 and like beans and rice. Like I can't do that. So it was, it was a struggle. And like my husband, he would like sneakily get together with some of the guys and they would have like a jam session and they would live stream that and people would send donations. But yeah, we lived off of donations. And even still, like that's kind of how I operate my yoga classes, like because I am still teaching online now. I got back into it again, which feels so good. But I wanted it to be affordable for people because like for myself, I couldn't afford it. And I just knew that it was going to be a really beneficial thing for people to be partaking in during that time. So I was like, whatever, I'm just going to do it and trust that the universe is going to give me enough to feed myself and my little family. And it was a rough, the pandemic was hard, really, really hard. But I mean, if it wasn't for that, would I have ever started teaching yoga online? I don't know.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that experience and how it was like in Mexico and Isla Mujeres. I'm sure maybe everyone have slightly different experience depending on where in the world they were at, but sounds very intense and very strict as well. You weren't able to go to the beach. You weren't able to even like, going into the grocery store, you'll get questioned by police with a gun. And yeah, sounds really intense. So how long did that last and when did things start opening back up? And I'm also curious how many online yoga classes you were teaching and were they all donation based?
They were definitely all donation based, that's for sure. And I still do that. I still a sliding scale, like as low as $5 up to, I put it up to like 25. But like you can pay whatever you want to pay. But when I was doing them as by donation, it was by donation or free if you can't afford it. So even if somebody was like in my situation, I was still like, no, no, please come, please enjoy this class. Once I had enough money to pay for like my Zoom account, then I was like, okay, we're switching from that to Zoom and like got a microphone, all the things. But yeah, I think that whole pandemic situation lasted until August, maybe a little bit later than August, but it was quite intense for like 3 or 4 months, I would say. And then things started to open up a little bit. And then we started getting some tourism back, which was great. It was so funny. It was like only the beach bars were allowed to be open. And like you could only serve alcohol if you were also serving food. Like there was like a whole, yeah, it was very interesting. So places that were just bars started turning into restaurants so that they could also sell alcohol because that's where you really got the more amount of money. And the tourists who were coming to enjoy themselves on the island, it's very much like a drinking culture on this island. So yeah, it was of benefit for people to be able to do that. So yeah, I think it was probably like August, September when things started to open up a bit more.
And when things started open back up, did you teach both like in online and in person, or did you kind of switch back all completely to in person again?
Yeah, I think it was actually right when everything was starting to open up. I also ended up getting connected with a yoga studio based out of Colorado that was doing live stream classes and they were looking for teachers. And I ended up getting connected with them. And so I was teaching my own personal, like First Nations Yogini classes. And I think I was teaching at that point 3 classes a week, which is the same as what I'm doing now. It's just that the dates are different. So I was teaching like one vinyasa, one yin yoga class, and one hatha yoga class. So I got 3 different styles. It's still the same as what I'm offering now, which is really fun for me. But anyways, started teaching for them as well. And so in a week now, I would be teaching around 14 classes, all from home, which was great because now all of a sudden, not only was I making enough money to feed myself, I was actually making more money than I was when I was just teaching classes in person on the beach. And so once things started opening up even more, then I was teaching my online classes, still teaching for that online Colorado studio. And then I also started teaching back on the beach again. And so I was like, I had my hand in all the little pots. And then that friend of mine, Lisa, she, during the pandemic, created her own yoga school. And she sent me a message one day and was like, hey, the teacher that I have isn't really interested in teaching the philosophy part of her class. Would you be interested in that? And at this point, I was an RYT 500, almost at my ERYT, like so close. And so I was like, yeah, I would love to. So I was teaching my online classes, a studio online class, in person on the beach, and then also like little portions of like philosophy at yoga teacher trainings. So all of a sudden I was so busy and I felt like I was actually finally doing decently well, but it literally took like 5 streams of income to get to that, which was exhausting and wonderful all at the same time.
Yeah. I've interviewed many teachers where they switched teaching online during the pandemic and they earned way more money. They could earn more than they used to when they were just teaching in-person classes and they don't have to leave their house or they don't have to teach as many classes running around from studio to studios because they were able to be very successful online. So I love hearing that you were also doing well with online and then you were also able to go back to in-person and kind of do both at the same time. I think that's a lot of the stories I hear. Not all. Some people didn't do well online and they were just so glad to go back to in person. So I've heard both stories, but similarly for me too, I started my online yoga studio during the pandemic. I still have it to this day. It's a small community, but I have very dedicated community of people who's like going to be with me. So I'm like, yes, I'll continue as long as I have students who want to continue practicing with me online. And it's not a huge portion of my income since I still teach quite a bit of in person now. Everything's open, but it's still a nice supplementary small side streams of income that I'm able to bring in from online. And also, I just love the feeling of independence that I am able to earn my own income without relying solely on other companies and other yoga studios. That it's nice to have, like, I have this little online community that, it's not a huge income, but it's, just enough. I love it. And I feel like that's mine. Like, I'm not reliant on other business owners. So this is my little business, which makes me feel really independent and also like liberated in some way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm curious about when you started teaching online, how did you promote your online classes? Did you kind of have communities from probably all over the world at the time that have come across your classes or your life in different point in your life? So how were you able to let everybody know, hey, I'm teaching online, come take my online classes?
Yeah, I mean, again, back to Facebook, right? Like I hopped right back in there. I didn't have my dedicated Facebook page, but from honestly, again, so grateful for the time that I was bartending because I made so many great connections from people from all over the world, like literally everywhere. And everybody would want to be your friend on Facebook. And so I would just add everybody because why not? I was like, who cares? This is great. And, same thing with Instagram. And so that was where all of my marketing was just in Facebook and Instagram. And I have struggled with my marketing over the years because I don't know, it's hard, I guess, to stay consistent. I'm really working hard on it now, but it's not something that comes really naturally to me. And so, yeah, that was my way of marketing. And I would get people's email addresses and then, put people on my email list, which I still have going. And now I've got like, I don't know, almost 300 people on my email list now, which feels amazing to me. But I think I'm just so lucky that I've met so many people. And it's always like travelers from all over the place. So, yeah. And some of those people that I had met, from teaching on the beach and, from bartending, they're part of my core online community still. Like I have this one couple in particular, shout out to Tam and Carl, because they have always been just so dedicated and love the online classes. And for them, it just fits so beautifully into their lifestyle. So they've been with me since like day one of teaching online. And I taught all the way up until I started teaching full-time teacher trainings. And then just recently when I started teaching online again, they were like, hell yeah, we're back, baby. And so now they're always in class again. And it's amazing. It's this community that's like managed to stick together for years. And I feel so grateful for that.
Oh, I love to hear that. Well, you just mentioned slightly that you kind of switched to teaching teacher training, so you stopped teaching online. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Where I know you teach quite a bit of teacher training in different countries, and you also taught in Peru. So how did that next, I guess, phase of your teaching?
Yeah, I the same person that asked me to start teaching little bits of philosophy. She also reached out to me to teach like a little bit bigger or like shadow or hey, can you also teach like some morning classes for this person because they really appreciate having help? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So that was great. And she definitely paid the best of like all of the things. So I really would prioritize going to those ones. And there was one point where I was teaching for her, I was teaching online, and I was still teaching in person on the beach. I wasn't teaching for the Colorado studio anymore. It was just my own online people. And, everybody else had really opened up again. So there was no need to be doing that. But she had a teacher trainer that was lined up for one of her programs. And I still don't understand what happened, but somehow somebody got double booked to lead a teacher training at one location. And then she didn't end up having anybody to teach this other teacher training. And there were only 3 people signed up because it was like the low season where it's usually in that area anyways, quite challenging to get people to come to teacher trainings. Year after year, it tends to be like the lowest month. So she was like, well, would you want to do that? And I was like, actually, yes, I just became an ERYT. I had just gotten my 2,000 hours under my belt after teaching like a crazy person during COVID. So I was like, yeah, I would love to. Honestly, when I first took my 200 hour and I had this aha moment of, you know, the yamas and the niyamas, I remember also being there and being like, my God, one day I would love to lead these programs. And I think it was because it was so influential and felt so important to me and just felt like such an amazing experience. I really wanted to, you know, help people cultivate that same thing and like give them the same kind of experience that I had. So it just felt like a dream. It just felt like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like I actually get to do this. Like I don't know. I think I never really thought it would happen. Just like I never really thought I'd actually be like a yoga teacher out in the world, you know, just kind of happened. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just really good at manifesting. I don't know like how it works, but yeah, so it kind of fell into my lap. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, we also have this other teacher training coming up here. Like, do you want to do that one? And I'm like, yes, like literally sign me up for every teacher training that you possibly have. And it got to the point where I was the main yoga teacher for this teacher training school. And I ended up doing 18 yoga teacher trainings in 1 year, which was not my smartest move. Great in the sense that, oh my gosh, financial stability, what a gift. Like it was so great in that sense. And I'm so grateful for it. And I freaking loved it. So it was wonderful. But I really didn't have any downtime. Like I would have 1 day off in between programs and then I'd have to go and do the next one. Sometimes I'd be lucky to get like 2 weeks off or something like that. But again, I found myself back in the yoga teacher burnout.
Where was all this teacher trainings we were leading?
Isla Mujeres.
Okay, so it was all at home for you.
Yes. Yes. Which was great because like I just lived a short bike ride away. It was a 15-minute ride on my bike, but it was just these teacher trainings were 14-day long teacher trainings with 1 day off in the program, but they're very big full days. And I was the only yoga teacher. Like it was just me running, you know, all of that. So it was a lot, you know, we're so lucky when we go and work for Moksha that there's 3 of us. So it feels, sometimes I feel like I'm not even working. Like, it's like, no, I just get to play with the people for a little while and then I go off and do my own thing and it's great. Whereas, you know, and it's 14 days, like all day, every day, and you're on, it's exhausting. I don't think people realize how much energy it takes to lead a teacher training. Like there's so much, at least for me, I find that I give so much of myself in them that it's very depleting. It's wonderful in so many ways, but like it can be really exhausting. That downtime is so important.
Completely agree with you. I love teaching trainings and teaching teachers. That's like really where I really feel like that like is, I don't know, my dharma. It just like feels so purposeful and fulfilling for me, but definitely it is a very, very energy draining. Like you need downtime. So you said you had a burnout after
Yeah.
teaching, what, 18 trainings in 1 year?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I went back and did the math on it. I was like, are you joking? Because it wasn't like that 18 trainings was actually over 10 months, I think. So it was actually less than a full year. It was wild. But then we started getting more teachers and they came in and that was great. And then like I was doing teacher trainings in Canada because we were doing them in my hometown because this is also where that other woman was from. So we'd be doing one there. It was so amazing, off grid, so much fun. And it was great for me because I was like, yes, we're back at home. I'm swimming in the river I've swam in for years. Like, this is fabulous. It was so good. And then we'd also do them in Joshua Tree in California. And then we had the ones in Mexico as well. But yeah, and then just things weren't working out well with that school anymore. Our friendship really started to die. I think that's the hard part about like being friends and being in work is it's really hard to keep those things separate. And especially when you're working all the time together, like the amount that I was working was really ridiculous. But I was excited about it. Like I was the one that was like, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, give me that training. I was never saying no to anything. but yeah, at some point we ended up going our separate ways, and that's kind of what led me to moving to Costa Rica for a year. That's what led me to Moksha.
Uh, okay, so you left Isla Mujeres and moved to Costa Rica with your partner?
Yes, yes. Which, in hindsight, I kind of wish we would have kept our place on the island. And I wish that he would have been able to stay there because he was a musician. And where we moved to in Costa Rica, there was no opportunity for him to play at all. It was a very, very small area on the Osa Peninsula. And so it was great for me. I was very excited. I, was having the opportunities to teach and things. And we moved to Costa Rica thinking that like we were moving there. So again, just like I did when I moved to Mexico, sold everything that we owned, packed it all up into 6 suitcases. We have 2 cats. So we took our 2 cats with us. Oh my God, that is not for the weak. Traveling with your cats is an absolute disaster and I don't recommend it. But yeah, so we packed everything up and went to Costa Rica, and then we were there for about a year, and then now we're back in Mexico.
Hey, so year you were in Costa Rica, were you teaching teacher trainings there or were you
Yes.
teaching classes?
Yeah, so actually somebody that I had met in 2019, her and I became friends in our 300 hour, which we had taken in Costa Rica. And we had become great friends. She was amazing. I really just like loved her, thought she was just everything and then some. She was so smart, like very intellectual. She was an Ayurvedic practitioner and then also a yoga teacher. And I was like, oh, this woman's amazing. And she ended up opening up a retreat center basically at the same time I stopped working for this other place on the island in Mexico. So it just felt kismet. And she was like, well, like, let's do this. Let's like open up a yoga school. And I was like, amazing. So gave her all the information to like open up the yoga school and like set up. I've never opened a yoga school myself, but I created a manual for the last trainings that I was in, and like kind of set up the program. And so gave her all of that as well and was like, yeah, let's do it. And in hindsight, again, like I tend to jump into things because I'm so excited and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And I'm like, I'm doing it with friends. And this again is just, I think we're just like, really got to be mindful. Because yeah, it was all her school, just with all of my information and stuff. So we started doing it, did a few teacher trainings, and then she had said that I was going to be there for a year. That was like our plan, was to do it for a year and see where we go from there. But within 4 months, they decided that they didn't want to do teacher trainings anymore and that they just wanted to do retreats. And they wanted to do retreats, like not in-house retreats, like retreats for people who had like really big followings, because it was a huge retreat center. This one in Costa Rica, it had like, I think 27 people is how many you could get there. Yeah. So it was really big. But it was beautiful. It was such an amazing location. And again, yeah, like a friendship, just, I think working together is just maybe not the best, or maybe I just don't pay enough attention to the people that I'm getting into business with. And yeah, it just didn't work out. So in August, we moved to Guadalajara, and we moved here because my husband's a musician and the band that he's loved forever asked him to be their guitarist. And so he was like, yeah. So we're like, let's move to Guadalajara. And so here we are.
Nice. So he's got his dream opportunities there.
Yes. Yeah, he really is living his dream right now. Like right now he's on tour. He's in Tijuana or Ensenada. I can't remember which one. So yeah, he's living his best life. And I'm really glad that we can have that like switch of things, because he's been so supportive of me being like, hey, honey, we're going to move to Costa Rica. I don't have a job for you. So you're not going to have a job for a year and you're just going to have to hang out. And he even took my yoga teacher training, bless his soul. Yeah, and then now it's like I kind of get to do that for him. So it feels really good.
Yeah, I love that. So after you left Costa Rica, moved to Guadalajara, that is when you got a job in Peru for Moksha and went to go teach there for a few months?
It was actually during the time when I stopped working for the school in Isla Mujeres. I had actually applied for a job with them through Yoga Trade because I could feel the relationship dying in the Isla school that I was at. So I was already plotting my way out, and I had applied, and then it was actually shortly after I stopped working for them that I got an email saying like, hey, we'd love to have you. We actually had a cancellation and we need somebody for, it was, yeah, October and November of 2023. And so I was like, yeah, that's great because our school in Costa Rica wasn't opening until January. So it was actually like really nice timing. So we moved to Costa Rica in August of 2023. And then by October, I was moving to, or not moving, but going to Peru for a couple of months, then came back to Costa Rica and we started the school. And yeah.
Wow, so amazing. So that kind of brings back to where you are now. So like what's your teaching schedule like now? I know you said you're back teaching online, but I also saw that you're doing trainings in Costa Rica. So is your, I don't know, are you teaching online and also traveling for different teacher trainings?
Yeah, so teaching online back to my like 3 classes a week with this beautiful community that I've got, and so teaching those, and then I ended up opening my own yoga school because I was like, maybe I just don't need to be working for people anymore. So I opened my own yoga school, and my first 200-hour training that I'm so excited about is in May of 2025, and it's at Anamaya Resort in Montezuma in Costa Rica, which is where I took my 300-hour back in 2019. So I'm so excited to be going back there. This location is phenomenal and it's going to be great. And then I've also, it's so funny, like I moved out of Costa Rica, but so many of my trainings are in Costa Rica. I also have a Yin and Yoga Nidra training in the beginning of March in Cahuita, Costa Rica. So it's on the Caribbean side. And that's at a place called Casa Firefly, which is actually owned by a friend of mine, Stacy, and Stacy is whose teacher training I covered back in the day when she was double booked. So the one that I covered of her that ended up being my first ever teacher training, well, she now opened up her own place in Costa Rica, and it's a beautiful like boutique, nice small group sizes. I think the maximum students is 12, and her shala is beautiful. It's like 5 minutes from the beach. It's really wonderful. And then she's very pregnant, and so she needs help with teacher trainings next year as well. So I'm going to go in and co-teach some 200 hours. And then in July, August of next year, so 2025, we're putting on our second 300 hours. So we did a 300-hour last year in Costa Rica, and it was so much fun. And so her, I, and then another Canadian girl who's actually from British Columbia, like only like an hour and a half away from where I was from. She's also a co-teacher with us. So there's the trifecta of us teaching a 300-hour in August. And I can't believe I'm in Costa Rica so many times after living there for a year. And then now I'm trying to leave and it doesn't seem to be working.
Wow, that sounds so amazing that you opened your own yoga school and you're teaching teacher trainings in Costa Rica, so many different ones, you know? That sounds, for me, it sounds like a dream. So, well, first thing that came to me is like, how are you able to find students to keep, signing up for your trainings to be able to make this a sustainable career?
I think one thing that I'm really grateful for is when I did those 18 teacher trainings in a row, I ended up meeting so many people. And so I've taught like hundreds of students, and through them, I have my own little network. So actually, a couple of the students that are signed up for my Yin program, I've already taught them their 200 hours. So they're coming for like a continuing education program, which is, so great because it's an opportunity for us to reconnect again. And I love the students that I've taught. Like you form such a beautiful relationship with them. So I'm so grateful to have them. Otherwise, I use just as much as I can. So stepping into the role of social media maiden, here I am. Like I'm trying so hard to keep consistent because that is definitely something that I see is really of benefit. Like you really have to stay out there and constantly be posting. So trying my best to do that. But I also use booking websites like Book Yoga Retreats, bookretreats.com. I have to say bookretreats.com was so easy to use. I love that platform. And actually, I just had somebody reach out to me because they found my Yin and Yoga Nidra program on Yoga Alliance. I didn't realize that people really like search through Yoga Alliance as well to find programs. So I'm so grateful that I actually properly put that up there because I would have missed out on this one person. So
Wow, I love hearing all of that. And also like hearing your whole journey to get to where you are now. It's very, very inspiring and also so exciting. So I do have a few more questions to wrap up now that we're like at the current stage of your life with the stories. What what kind of advice would you give, I guess, to yoga teachers who's listening to this and they're listening to your story and be like, wow, like how can I get to where she's at? Or how can I teach a teacher trainings or how can I even build my own school? So like I feel like any advice you want to share with them or any tips somebody gave you that meant a lot to you or anything like that.
I think it's really important to have people in your corner, people that want to see you succeed. Maybe this is like friends or, in my case, I'm so grateful that my husband's been so supportive of everything. But yeah, you really need to have people in your corner. And I think it's, at least from my experience, it's hard. It's really hard. It looks so good on the ground. Like, you see the people and they're on the beach and, they're teaching yoga and that looks amazing. But then in the reality of it, like, have you ever tried teaching yoga on a beach? It actually kind of sucks. Like, it's not nice on the wrists. There's sand everywhere. Like, it's being really real about it and like recognizing that it's not all rainbows and sunshine. And you have to, I guess, decide like if it is really something that you want to be doing and recognize that people along the way are going to tell you that like what you're doing is silly or it's not realistic. I'm really grateful that I have, a mom and dad who are so supportive of me. And like my dad's wife, she's beautifully supportive of me as well. But then like my mom's partner, he thinks what I do is absolutely stupid. And it's hard when it comes from somebody that's like kind of close to you because it hurts different. But you have to recognize that like people are out there are going to think that like I get called a freeloading hippie, which it's like, well, if that's what you want to consider it that I am, then that's fine. Like to him, teaching yoga is not a real job. And I got to tell you, some days it doesn't feel like a real job, which is also amazing, like as if you don't want that for your life. So, I mean, my advice is that if you are actually passionate about it, you have to be actually passionate about it. Like you can't just want to do it because it looks like fun. Like it's hard. You have to work really hard. You have to push yourself outside of your comfort zones, which for me has looked like a lot of things, living in different countries, speaking a different language and like trying to learn all these things and like, figure out where you really belong. But I can't imagine going back to banking. So I think if you are going to have a job in your life, something that's going to have to bring in money for you, why not try to find something that you actually enjoy? And if you're the kind of person who can like beautifully separate the job from the money, then great. Continue on and like, just teach yoga on the side and live your best life. If you're somebody who's lucky enough to have a partner that makes a lot of money, that I think would be really helpful. So, like if anyone who's listening that's single, like put that on the list, make sure that your partner makes good money so that you can be a yoga teacher because yeah, in the beginning, it's not easy. The yoga market especially is so competitive. Like everyone's a yoga teacher now, it feels like. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing, but it can make it challenging to get the job. So just you really have to be passionate about it and like I don't know. I just like Amy told me, I think I am meant to be a yoga teacher. I don't think I'm meant for something else. And maybe I will be, maybe my dharma will change at some point and I'll be meant for something different. But right now it feels like being a yoga teacher is what I'm supposed to be doing, yoga teacher trainings specifically. And so I'm just going to keep following that until I can't.
Yeah, thank you for saying all of that. That's everything you said. I've been told yoga teaching is not a real job as well in the past. So, but we're still here. We're still doing it. And we're actually, I mean, from, what I know of you and what I know about myself, we're both a successful yoga teacher. We've been doing this for years and years and able to make it into a career. So it's I think for listeners, you probably will hear somebody doubt you as trying to pursue your career as a yoga teacher, but you just have to believe in yourself, keep going. And it's helpful to always have some kind of role model or somebody who's already walking the path and knowing that it is possible, I think is important. And hopefully, this podcast and sharing this kind of journey, listeners can know that, yes, it is possible if you really want it. Just two more questions for you. What does success mean to you as a full-time yoga teacher?
Well, I guess there's a couple of ways I would view success because, success from like I've created a sustainable business that feeds me and my family. That's success. Success is in that sense being able to turn my passion of teaching into food on the table, lights on, roof over my head. That to me is successful. But as a yoga teacher, what for me feels like success is when I can see that what I'm offering is of benefit to other people. Like success looks like helping someone discover something about themselves that maybe they already knew, but they just, needed a little nudge in one direction, or, helping see the potential in someone that maybe they didn't see in themselves, just like Amy for me. So I think, yeah, I think success as a yoga teacher shows up more in the benefit that you provide for other people.
Beautiful. And I'm sure
Sounds really corny.
you are, Amy, to so many of your students, that you are that teacher who really believe in them, that they can become a great yoga teacher, and you're giving them skill sets to do so. So I love that. It's like a full circle.
Yeah.
And last question for you is, what's next in terms of like, what do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself? I guess in terms of your yoga teaching career, like what do you see that going? I know you started your own school, you're doing a lot of teacher training. Is there like a goal that you have or direction that you want to take your teaching or your career business towards, or anything that you're trying to manifest?
I really want to get to the point where I am able to be offering, online classes, because I do really love them. I love the opportunity to still teach like a public class like that. But I want my yoga school to build up to a point where it's, there's some form of like recognition there. And that doesn't mean like I need like some global scale. I don't need to be the celebrity yoga teacher. It's not that, but I want to have consistent full yoga teacher trainings. I want to be able to get to a point where I only need to offer a couple of teacher trainings a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I can dedicate the other, times in that year to building up and supporting my online community. I really am most passionate about leading trainings, whether they're continuing education programs or if they're full-on 200 or 300-hour programs. But that's really what lights me up the most. So I just want to be able to do that in a way that is sustainable financially, but sustainable physically as well. I don't want to lead 18 teacher trainings in 1 year. I don't. I want to lead a few, and I want to be able to give everything that I have in those programs and help foster really wonderful people discover their own natural talents, their own authentic expression of what they would look like as a teacher.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's so beautifully said. I'm sure you're way on your way towards that. So I'll be really looking forward to just following you from afar on Instagram. But maybe hopefully I'll get to meet you in person someday, maybe in Costa Rica.
Yeah, can we manage to like ask Shirley and Vincent to put us in the same training at Moksha?
That would be amazing.
Right? I would love that.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Thank you so much for all your time and such a beautiful story and journey you shared with us. And also, like I said, I think for me, it has made a huge impact when I speak to teachers or see teachers or know teachers who's doing such an inspiring thing that inspires me to keep going. So I really appreciate you. You're doing that. You're teaching teacher training. I'm sure you are that light and the path for a lot of students of yours who probably look up to you with all that you do. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And can you tell the listeners, I know you told us a little bit about all the upcoming retreats and trainings that you have, but how can they find you? Any social media or website, anything you want to share with the listeners, anything upcoming?
Well, I mean, let me tell you everything. So you can find me on Instagram at First Nations Yogini. My website is firstnationsyogini.com, and you can always find all of my offerings there or in my bio on my Instagram. I have, lots of trainings coming up this year, and I'm really excited about them. The Yin and Yoga Nidra training that I have is a 50-hour program. It's an 8-day program in Costa Rica, in Cahuita at Casa Firefly. And that's March 2nd to March 9th. And we're already starting to fill her up. So if you want to come and join us, please do send me a message. Let's connect. And I also have the inaugural 200-hour training for my yoga school, which is Two Rivers Yoga. And that program starts May 17th and goes until June 7th. So a nice 3-week-long program. You get 2 days off in the program. We love that. And that's in Montezuma at Anamaya Resort. Absolutely stunning, gorgeous place. They have a sauna and a cold plunge. I'm so excited. The pool is amazing. The views are phenomenal. I can't even express how unreal they are. And I've also got that 300-hour happening in August. I think it actually starts July 29th. That's also at Casa Firefly with my friends Stacy and Sarah, fellow Canadians. And it's going to be a really amazing year of goodies. If you're not somebody who's interested in taking a teacher training, I do have the online classes that can be booked through my website, First Nations Yogini. I teach on Tuesday mornings. I teach a Hatha style class. It's 60 minutes long. So really nice for just kind of waking up the body and preparing yourself for the week ahead. Thursday evenings, I have a Yin and Yoga Nidra class that sometimes is restorative, but most of the time she's Yin and Yoga Nidra. It's my favorite. I can't get away from it. So I lead a 75-minute class on Thursday evenings, and then Sunday morning, full on 90-minute classes. So you get vinyasa style, and we will meditate, an actual dedicated amount of time for meditation. We love that. Usually there's a little bit of chanting or some kind of, glorious theme to keep us flowing and moving. And I feel like it's just the greatest way to start your Sunday, honestly. Sunday Fun Day starts with yoga. And then you go and do all the things that you must, but those would be my offerings that I've got currently. I hope I didn't forget them. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this was really great. I'm so glad that we were able to connect. It is just so funny that you and I had connected via Instagram a year ago, more than that now, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. So I love that we get the opportunity to connect, and, thanks for asking such great questions. There's a lot of things that I don't think I've ever sat and really told anyone my full journey before. And so I had a lot of interesting realizations in this conversation. So thank you for that. It's been really equally beneficial for me, I think. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I really appreciate you taking time to share your journey and your story with us. And I'll link everything on the show notes, how people can find you and connect with you. So thank you so much. And I really hope we'll get to meet in person someday.
Oh, thank you. I would love that. Yes, please.
Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode and the conversation I had with Michelle. I hope you were very inspired by Michelle. I just love how she traveled all over the place and she taught yoga in so many places, and how she taught so many teacher trainings. Wow, her starting her own yoga school sounds like a dream, and teaching all the trainings in beautiful Costa Rica. Just loved hearing all that she's doing, and you can really tell how much love she have for yoga and teacher trainings. So thank you, Michelle, for being here and talking to us about your journey. I really hope I get to meet her one day in person. So that is it. I hope everybody have a wonderful week. I know it's a holiday week if you're listening to this in real time. I know it can be a busy week, maybe a stressful week, maybe a week that is heavy or sad for some of us. So just know that I'm wishing all of you a peaceful week, and I hope whether you are busy or you have a slow week, whether you're going to be surrounded by so many people or whether you're going to be alone, I hope you find some time to experience joy in the small things. Experience joy in just a mundane, everyday small things. I think when I get busy, I forget to enjoy the little things in life, and I think that's where the true joy exists. Not this huge trip you take across the world, not this huge event or gathering or parties, but this everyday thing, like walking around your neighborhood and noticing the beautiful flower, or looking up at the sky and noticing the beautiful moon. Those little things in life, I hope you find some time to see the beauty of it and find joy in that. So that is it for now. I hope you have a great week, and I will speak to you next week.